The sun was only a thin line of gold on the horizon when Caleb stepped out of his small ranch house. The storm from the previous night had left the air cool and sharp, and drops of water still clung to the porch railing. Caleb stretched his stiff shoulders, pulled on his hat, and began his usual morning routine. He had lived alone on the ranch for years, and every morning followed the same quiet pattern: feed the horses, check the fences, look over the cattle, and repair anything the wind or weather had disturbed. But something about this morning felt different, though he couldn't explain why, as he saddled his old horse. Dusty, he noticed the west pasture gate hanging crooked. "Storm must have pushed it," he muttered. He knew he had to fix it before any cattle wandered off. So he mounted the horse and rode toward the far edge of his land. The path was muddy, and branches lay broken across the trail. The wind had worked hard the night before. Caleb kept scanning the ground, making sure none of his animals had gotten hurt in the storm. He wasn't a man who panicked easily. He never expected trouble out on his ranch. But when he reached the old cottonwood tree near the far fence, he pulled the reins suddenly. Someone was there at first. He thought maybe it was one of the ranch hands from a neighboring farm, hurt or taking shelter. But as he came closer, he realized it was a young woman alone. Silent, wrapped in a torn, dusty blanket. She was sitting on the ground with her knees pulled up, her arms wrapped tightly around them. Her head was bent low, and her long hair hung in messy strands across her face. She looked like she hadn't slept the entire night. Caleb felt a jolt of surprise. People didn't just wander onto his land. And a stranger, especially a young woman, sitting out here after a storm? That didn't make sense. He stopped a short distance away, making sure not to startle her. "Ma'am," he called gently. "Are you all right?" She didn't move at first. She didn't even lift her head. For a moment, Caleb wondered if she was too cold, too tired, or too scared to answer. The blanket around her shoulders trembled as if she were shivering. Caleb took one slow step forward. "Ma'am, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. Finally, she raised her head. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, and her lips slightly trembling. She looked exhausted, not just from the storm or from walking, but from something deeper. Caleb felt his breath catch. She looked completely worn out, like someone who had been carrying a heavy weight for far too long. Her voice came out in a weak whisper. "It hurts," she said, struggling to breathe evenly. Inside as well, Caleb froze. He didn't know what she meant at first. Was she talking about an injury? A sickness? Or something emotional? His heart tightened with worry, but he stayed calm. He didn't want to frighten her more. He knelt down slowly so he was closer to her level, keeping a little distance to show respect. "Where does it hurt?" he asked gently. "Can you tell me? Did you fall? Did something happen?" She shook her head slowly, tears filling her eyes again. Not like that," she whispered. "It's everything. I don't know what to do anymore." Caleb felt a strange ache in his chest. It wasn't pity. He wasn't a man who looked down on anyone. It was concern. Real concern. Something in her voice told him she had gone through a long night, maybe a long month, or even a long year. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Mara," she whispered. He nodded. "All right, Mara. My name is Caleb. I live here on this ranch. You're safe now, all right? Can you stand? Can I help you get somewhere warm?" She hesitated. She looked down at her hands, scraped and bruised from walking over rough ground. She looked like someone who had traveled far without planning, without food, without rest. "I don't want to be a burden," she said softly. "You aren't," Caleb replied without a second thought. He held out a hand, careful not to touch her unless she chose it. After a moment, she slowly placed her hand in his. Her fingers were cold and trembling. He helped her stand, supporting her lightly as she leaned on him to steady herself. She winced when she put weight on her foot, and Caleb noticed a slight limp. "You hurt your leg?" he asked. "I tripped on some rocks during the night," she murmured. "I kept walking because I didn't know where else to go. I just saw lights from far away. I thought maybe someone lived here." "You thought right," Caleb said gently. He guided her toward Dusty, the old horse, and lifted her up carefully so she didn't strain her leg. Mara clung lightly to the saddle, afraid of slipping. But Caleb placed a steadying hand on her arm. "You'll be okay," he assured her. "It's just a short ride to the house." As they rode back, Mara kept looking around, at the wide fields, the soft morning light, the hills in the distance. Her face showed a mixture of fear, confusion, and amazement. It was clear she had never been on a ranch before. Caleb didn't ask questions on the way. He sensed she needed time. Her silence wasn't because she didn't want to speak. It was the silence of someone too tired to explain everything at once. When they reached the ranch house, he helped her down from the horse and guided her inside. The house was simple but warm, with wooden walls, a small fireplace, and the faint smell of coffee. Caleb placed a warm coat over her shoulders and handed her a clean glass of water. She drank carefully, as if even lifting the cup took effort. "Sit down," he said softly, pulling out a chair for her. "You need to rest." She lowered herself into the chair and closed her eyes for a moment, as if the simple comfort of a seat felt like a gift. Caleb watched her quietly, wondering what had brought her to this state. After a few moments, she looked up. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't even know me and I." "You don't need to apologize," he said gently. "Sometimes people go through things that make them lose direction. You're safe now. That's what matters first." A tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. "I left home last night," she said softly. "There was a family fight. A big one. Things were said. I couldn't stay. I just ran." Caleb listened without interrupting. He wasn't the kind of man who rushed someone to talk. He knew some stories needed time to come out. "I didn't know where to go," Mara continued. "I walked for hours. My phone, the battery died. And then, when the storm came, I just kept walking until I saw lights in the distance. I didn't know whose place it was. I didn't even know if anyone would help." "I'm glad you found your way here," Caleb said quietly. She looked at him with tired eyes. "Why? Why would you help a stranger sitting on your land?" Caleb thought for a moment before answering. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "And no decent person ignores someone who's hurting." Her lips trembled again at his gentle tone. It was clear she had expected something very different in life: distance, rejection, maybe even anger. She wasn't used to kindness. After a few minutes, Caleb stood up. "I think a doctor should take a look at your leg," he said softly, "and maybe check if you're dehydrated. I know someone local. He's trustworthy." Mara shook her head quickly. "No hospitals," she whispered fearfully. "I don't want to go anywhere too official. My family might look for me. I'm not ready to see them." Caleb nodded. "All right. But this doctor doesn't ask questions. He doesn't need to. He's an old friend. He can come here." Mara hesitated, but finally nodded. She didn't have the strength to argue. Caleb stepped outside, called the doctor, and returned a few minutes later. "He'll be here soon," he said gently. Mara sat quietly at the table, holding the coat around her shoulders. She looked small and fragile, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes, someone trying to stay brave. Even when the world felt too heavy, Caleb made her a small bowl of warm soup. She held the spoon with shaking fingers, but after the first few bites, some color returned to her face. "You're very kind," she said softly. "More than anyone has been to me in a long time." Caleb gave a small, humble shrug. "People just forget how to treat each other sometimes. Doesn't mean kindness is gone." She looked at him for a long moment, as if she couldn't believe someone could speak so simply and honestly. Outside, the morning sun had risen fully, casting warm light through the window. But inside the small ranch house, a different kind of light was growing, a quiet understanding. A moment of safety and the beginning of trust. Mara finally exhaled, her shoulders loosening for the first time since he found her. Though she was still hurting, both physically and inside her heart, she felt just for a moment that she might be able to breathe again. And Caleb, who had spent years alone on the ranch, realized that this unexpected morning was going to change more than just his routine. It was the beginning of a story neither of them had seen coming. The doctor arrived just as the morning sun reached the ranch house windows. Caleb opened the door and let Dr. Rowan, a calm and friendly older man, step inside. The doctor carried a small leather bag and wore a gentle expression that made most people relax immediately. When Mara saw him, she stiffened slightly, her fingers gripping the blanket around her shoulders. Caleb noticed and gave her a reassuring nod. "It's all right," he said softly. "He's here to help. Nothing more." Dr. Rowan offered Mara a kind smile. "No need to worry. I'm just going to check your leg and make sure you're all right. Caleb told me you've had a rough night." Mara swallowed hard but nodded. Dr. Rowan pulled up a chair and gently examined the bruised area around her ankle. His touch was light and careful, as if he knew she was already overwhelmed emotionally and physically. "Well," said after a moment, "you didn't break anything. It's just swollen from walking on uneven ground and from exhaustion. You need rest and water. And food." He glanced at Caleb with a small smile. "She's in good hands here." Mara lowered her gaze. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb stood nearby, watching as the doctor checked her pulse, her breathing, and the scrapes on her hands. Everything pointed to exhaustion more than injury. She was worn down from stress, worry, and a long night in the storm. When Dr. Rowan finished, he packed his tools and gently touched Mara's shoulder. "You'll be all right. It's just rest. And talk if you feel like it. Sometimes pain inside gets lighter when shared." After the doctor left, Caleb walked back into the room with 2 cups of warm tea. Mara looked at the steaming cup he placed in front of her, then at him with quiet gratitude. "You didn't have to call a doctor," she said softly. "Yes, I did," Caleb replied. "You were hurting. Anyone could see that." She lowered her eyes again. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She tried to hide it by brushing her hair in front of her face. But Caleb noticed anyway. "Hey," he said gently, sitting across from her. "You're safe here. You can cry if you need to. Nothing wrong with that." "Just," she whispered, wiping her face with the blanket's edge. "I didn't expect a stranger to care. Not like this." Caleb gave a small, quiet shrug. "Maybe more people care than you think. Maybe you've just been around the wrong ones lately." Mara's lips trembled, but she took a slow sip of the tea. "Maybe," she whispered. Settling into the ranch, Caleb suggested she rest in the small guest room at the end of the hallway. She hesitated at first. She didn't want to impose, and she felt uneasy being in a stranger's home. But the moment she stepped into the simple room with a soft bed, a window overlooking the pasture, and a clean quilt folded neatly on top, her knees nearly gave out from relief. "She hadn't slept in almost 24 hours, Caleb," she whispered, turning back toward him. "Thank you." Nodded. "Rest now. We'll talk later." She lay down on the bed, the quilt warm against her cold skin. For the first time, in what felt like forever, there were no loud voices, no arguments, no fear that someone would burst into the room yelling. Only silence and the soft sound of wind brushing against the house. She fell asleep within minutes. Quiet afternoon when Mara woke again. The sun was higher in the sky. She smelled something good, fresh bread, maybe stew. She sat up slowly, noticing the swelling in her ankle had gone down a little. She stood carefully, testing her weight, and although it hurt, it wasn't unbearable. She walked to the kitchen, holding the wall lightly for balance. Caleb was at the stove stirring a pot. When he turned and saw her, he paused. "You should be resting," he said in a gentle voice. "I've slept enough," she murmured, though her tired eyes said otherwise. "I didn't want to stay in bed all day." "Well, at least sit down," Caleb said. "You still need time." She sat at the small table. Caleb placed a bowl of warm vegetable soup in front of her. The steam rose gently, filling the air with the smell of carrots and herbs. She stared at it for a moment, overwhelmed again by the simple kindness. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to," Caleb replied. She took a spoonful, then another, realizing how hungry she had been without noticing. When she finished half the bowl, she looked up at Caleb. "I guess you want to know why I was out there," she said quietly. "Only if you want to tell me," Caleb said. "Your story is yours. I won't push." For a long moment, Mara stayed silent. Her eyes moved from the window to her bowl to her hands. Then she finally exhaled. my family. We had a big argument, she began slowly. It wasn't one fight. It's been happening for months. Everything falling apart piece by piece. Caleb listened quietly. He didn't interrupt or judge. My parents separated recently, she said, her voice cracking. Our home is being sold. My siblings moved away. Everyone is scattered. And she swallowed hard. I felt like I didn't have a place anymore. Everyone blamed each other. I was stuck in the middle. She rubbed her temples gently, as if the memory itself caused physical pain. Last night, everything boiled over. Voices got loud. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed a blanket and just left. I didn't even think. I walked until my legs hurt, and then I kept walking anyway. Caleb's eyes softened, and when the storm hit, he asked gently. I hid under a tree at first, she said, but the wind was strong. I kept going until I saw the lights from your ranch. I didn't even know if someone lived here. I just hoped. Caleb looked at her, a deep sympathy in his eyes. He didn't know her whole life, but he understood that pain. Many people carried invisible wounds that no one saw. I'm sorry you went through all that, he said softly. No one should feel like they're alone in the world. Mara wiped her eyes again. I felt like something inside me broke last night. Not physically, just inside. That's what I meant when I said it hurts. Caleb nodded slowly. Sometimes emotional pain is heavier than anything. Mara looked at him, surprised by how easily he understood. She had expected someone to tell her she was overreacting, or being too sensitive, or running away from problems. But Caleb didn't say anything like that. Instead, he stood up and poured her a little more soup. Eat, he said softly. You'll feel better. Finding small comforts after lunch, Caleb brought out a small wooden box filled with basic tools, things he used for mending fences. Fixing saddles, repairing gates, he placed it on the table. What's that for? Mara asked. I figured you might want something to keep your hands busy, he said. Sometimes working helps calm the mind. Only if you want to, of course. Mara looked inside the box. There were pieces of leather, thread, and a few scrap materials. She picked up a small leather strip and ran her fingers over it. It felt grounding, solid, real. Something simple to focus on. I used to make bracelets when I was younger, she murmured. Go ahead, Caleb said. You can make anything you like. Mara smiled faintly. For the first time since he found her, she looked like someone who remembered a small piece of who she used to be. While she worked, Caleb stepped outside to tend to the animals. When he returned later, he saw Mara sitting on the porch, her ankle resting on a stool, a small braided leather bracelet in her hand. You're good at that? Caleb said. I forgot how much I liked making things, she said quietly. Sometimes we forget good things when life gets hard, Caleb replied. Mara looked out at the wide ranch field stretching endlessly. The open land felt peaceful, nothing like the noise and pressure she had run from. Evening conversations as the sun began to set. Caleb lit a small lantern and set it on the porch between them. The warm glow softened the night air. Mara wrapped the blanket around herself and watched the sky turn deep orange and pink. I used to like sunsets, she said quietly. You don't anymore? I stopped noticing them for a while, she admitted. Life got too loud. I didn't have time to enjoy anything, Caleb nodded. Sometimes quiet places remind us of what we forgot. She smiled slightly. You speak like someone who has been through something too. Caleb looked toward the horizon, his expression thoughtful. Maybe. Everyone has their stories. I lost my parents early. Grew up learning to work more than talk. Life teaches lessons differently to everyone. Mara listened, appreciating that he wasn't trying to give advice or lecture her. He simply shared a little of himself, enough to show that he understood struggle. Do you ever feel lonely out here? She asked. Sometimes, he admitted. But I also feel peaceful. There's honesty in this land. It doesn't pretend. People sometimes pretend too much. Mara nodded slowly. I think that's what hurt me the most. Everything felt fake. Everyone kept acting like they were okay, even when they weren't. And I was stuck in the middle, trying to hold everyone together. She pressed her hand to her chest. It made me feel like I was breaking inside. Caleb looked at her softly. But you're here now, and you're stronger than you think. Mara blinked, surprised by his confidence in her. They sat quietly for a while, watching the stars appear one by one. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, like a soft blanket wrapped around both of them. When Mara finally stood to return inside, she paused at the door. Caleb? Yes. Thank you for listening, she said softly. I didn't think anyone would care. Caleb gave her a gentle, steady smile. Sometimes people just need one person to care. I'm glad I could be that person for you tonight. Mara held his gaze for a moment longer. Her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, a small spark of hope she hadn't felt in a very long time. Then she walked inside. Her steps slow but steady. Caleb remained. Morning sunlight entered through the guest room window, landing softly on Mara's face. She blinked awake, feeling calmer than she had in days. The night's rest had settled her thoughts a little, and the fear that had pressed down on her chest was lighter still present, but not crushing. For a moment, she simply sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wooden floor, listening to the quiet sounds of ranch life. Chickens clucking somewhere outside. The distant sound of a horse's hooves tapping the ground. A soft wind brushing against the house. She breathed deeply. This place felt safe. A knock sounded on the door. You awake? Caleb asked from the hallway. Yes, she replied, her voice steady. Caleb pushed the door open a little, smiled gently when he saw her sitting up instead of curled in fear. Breakfast is ready, he said. I'll be there, she whispered as she stood. She felt a slight ache in her ankle, but it was much better than yesterday. She walked slowly toward the kitchen, using the wall for support out of habit more than need. The smell of warm bread and fried eggs filled the small house. Caleb set a plate on the table for her. I hope you're hungry, he said. I actually am, she admitted with a small smile. They ate in a peaceful silence at first. Caleb was not a man who forced conversation, and Mara appreciated that. After a few bites, she looked up. Caleb, she said softly, I feel stronger today. I can see that, he replied, meeting her gaze. I think... She paused, trying to gather her thoughts. I think I should go back to town. Not to stay. Just to talk. I ran away without thinking, and maybe I need to face things. Caleb put his fork down slowly. Only if you're ready, he said. There's no rush. I'm not sure I'm ready, she admitted. But I don't want to hide either. Caleb nodded. I can take you. You won't face anything alone. Her eyes warmed with gratitude. He didn't treat her like a problem. He didn't tell her what she was supposed to do. Simply offered support. That simple kindness meant more to her than he knew. One more walk before leaving after breakfast. Caleb helped her step outside onto the porch. The day was bright, the sky clear. Mara breathed in the fresh air, feeling it fill her lungs in a way it hadn't in a long time. I want to walk a little before we go, she said. Caleb nodded. Just take it slow. I'll walk with you. They walked side by side along the fence line. The grass was still wet from morning dew. The sunlight reflected off the droplets like tiny stars on the ground. It's beautiful here, Mara murmured. It's quiet, Caleb said. Some people like it. Some people can't stand it. I think I needed it, she said softly. I didn't realize how much until now. Caleb slowed his steps so she could walk comfortably with her healing ankle. You know, Mara added thoughtfully, yesterday I felt like everything was falling apart completely. But today, it feels like I can maybe put myself back together piece by piece. That's how healing works, Caleb said quietly. Little steps. She glanced at him. You helped me take those steps. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, a little shy. I just did what anyone with a heart would do. Not everyone, Mara said gently. Some people would have ignored me. Or told me to go away. You didn't. Caleb looked out at the open land, avoiding her eyes because the emotion in her voice made his chest feel heavy. Well, he said softly, I'm glad I didn't. Preparing to leave by midday, Mara felt calm enough to return to town. Caleb hitched the wagon instead of taking the horse alone, so Mara wouldn't have to sit uncomfortably. She stepped up into the wagon. Carefully placing her injured foot on a blanket, Caleb had folded for her. You ready? He asked. She nodded. I think so. As they rode, Mara looked at the fields rolling by, the trees, the long dirt road, the open sky. Everything looked peaceful, nothing like the storm inside her heart from the night before. Caleb, she said softly. Yes. If my family reacts badly, if things don't go well, can I come back here? She asked carefully, almost as if she feared the answer. Caleb didn't hesitate. Yes, he said firmly. You can always come back here. My door's open to you. Relief washed over her face. She nodded quickly and looked down at her hands, blinking to stop fresh tears. Not painful tears. Grateful ones. Facing the family when they entered town, Mara's heart started to beat faster. Everything she had run from was here memories, words that hurt. Unresolved fights. Caleb stopped the wagon in front of her family's home but didn't make a move to get out. Do you want me to go with you? He asked. Mara thought for a moment. No, I should do this alone, she said softly. But can you wait outside? Caleb nodded. Of course. Mara stepped down carefully and walked toward the door. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to knock. Her mother opened the door. The shock on her mother's face was immediate. Mara? Where were you? We've been looking. The words spilled out, but Mara raised her hand gently. Please, she said softly. Let's talk. All of us. Her father appeared in the doorway. Her sister soon followed. Voices rose, then fell, then steadied. The conversation wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. There were tears, apologies, and long pauses where pain hung heavy in the air. But there was honest as something they hadn't had in a long time, and honesty was enough to begin healing. When Mara finally walked out of the house, her face was wet with tears, but her expression was different, softer, lighter, as if she had released a heavy weight she didn't know how to carry anymore. Caleb stepped down from the wagon, concerned. You okay? He asked. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. I'm better, she whispered. It was hard, but good. She looked back at the house. We talked. Really talked. It hurt, but it also helped. It's going to take time, but I don't feel lost anymore. Caleb gave a gentle smile. I'm proud of you. Mara felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. A new peace on the way back to the ranch. Mara talked more freely, not tense, not afraid. She spoke about her family, her hopes, the things she wanted to fix slowly. Caleb listened, nodding, offering quiet support like he always did. When they reached the ranch again, Mara stepped down and took a deep breath of the familiar, peaceful air. This place, she said softly, gave me the strength I needed. It was already in you, Caleb replied. No, you just needed a quiet place to find it. She looked at him, grateful from the bottom of her heart. You did more than that, she said. You gave me kindness when I had nothing left. Caleb cleared his throat, a little uncomfortable with praise. Anyone would have done the same? No, she said gently. Not anyone. You. He didn't respond right away. But the softness in his expression showed her that her words meant something. Weeks later, it was almost sunset one evening when Caleb heard footsteps approaching the ranch gate. He looked up from repairing a fence and froze. Mara was walking toward him. Her steps confident, her posture steady, her eyes bright. He stood slowly. You're back, he said. She smiled warmly. I told you I might come again. She looked healthier, mentally and physically. Her ankle was healed. Her face held peace instead of fear. It was no longer the girl he found trembling under a tree. She was stronger now. I wanted to thank you properly, she said, for helping me when I was at my lowest, for giving me a place to breathe, for listening. Caleb nodded. You've grown a lot since that day, 'cause you made me feel safe, she replied softly. You helped me believe that not everything is broken. Caleb looked at her quietly, the evening light reflecting in his eyes. I'm glad you're doing better. Still have a long way to go, she admitted. But now I know I can make it. She glanced around the ranch. If you ever need help with chores or company, I wouldn't mind coming by more often. Caleb smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. I'd like that, he said. And in that moment, something shifted gently between them. Not a dramatic change, but a quiet understanding. A bond formed not from dramatic events, but from kindness, trust, and simple human connection. The ranch that had once felt lonely to Caleb now felt fuller, and Mara, who once felt broken inside, now carried hope where pain used to be. Their story didn't end there. It didn't need a final line. It was the beginning of something steady, honest, and healing. Something built slowly. It's like sunrise on a quiet morning, something real.